Channel right now. By the time you watch this live stream, John Bolton will almost certainly have been indicted. Daily Mail, John Bolton set to be indicted by a grand jury today over sharing secret files. Washington Examiner. It's all over, ladies and gentlemen. New York Post. Grand jury expected to indict ex-National Security Advisor John Bolton for transmitting classified documents. Should be today. And before we get to the legal analysis, I want to read you conclusion by the judge 5 years ago. Defendant Bolton has gambled with national security of the United States. He has exposed his country to harm and himself to civil and potentially criminal liability. This is not about a retribution tour. The people who went after Trump broke laws left and right almost certainly. They leaked information. I mean, Comey is on record as stating he deliberately leaked memos that were once reportedly classified. So, and they might still be. But, I mean, they leaked information to journalists. They lied. They set up and framed Trump with a Steele dossier literally purchased by Clinton and the DNC. Imagine if Trump and Giuliani had purchased a dossier that said that Hillary or Harris or Joe or President Obama were in a Moscow hotel room. Anyway, experiencing a certain type of activity. Anyway, hit subscribe to this channel. Go to H.A. Goodman's other channel right now after this. Let's get started. I want to read you, I'll read you more of the original, the judge's conclusions pertaining to Bolton and the classified information that he allegedly put into his book. But check this out. This is pretty much an amazing recap of what Bolton is going to be indicted for, or when you're watching this segment, has already been indicted for.
With classified information in it. The background, John Bolton accepted a role as National Security Advisor. This is written in the decision by Judge Lamberth. In April 2018, in this position, Bolton directed and supervised the work of the National Security Council staff on behalf of the president. Think about that position, how important it is. He left his post on September 10, 2019. Within 2 months, he secured a book deal. The government anticipates the public officials will seek to publish accounts of their experiences. When those officials have access to sensitive information that implicates national security, the government guards that information by conditioning employment on a guarantee of non-disclosure. Bolton accepted this condition of employment and executed multiple non-disclosure agreements with the government. In one agreement, Standard Form 312, Bolton agreed that he would, quote, never divulge classified information to anyone unless A, he has officially verified that the recipient has been properly authorized by the United States government to receive it, or B, he has been given prior written notice of authorization from the United States government that such disclosure is permitted. In the event Bolton was uncertain about the classification status of information, he was required to confirm from an authorized official that the information is unclassified before he may disclose it. Violation can result in assigning to the United States government all royalties, remunerations, and emoluments that have resulted, will result, or may result from any disclosure, publication, or revelation of classified information not consistent with the terms of SF 312. Bolton agreed to abide by the restrictions of SF 312 unless and until he is released in writing by an authorized representative of the United States government. Another agreement form, 4414, detailed conditions Bolton must follow to gain access to highly classified, sensitive, compartmental information, SCI. That's the highest level. Here, Bolton agreed to submit for security review any writing or other preparation in any form that contains or purports to contain any SCI or description of activities that produce or relate to SCI, or that he has reason to believe are derived from SCI, that he contemplates disclosing to any person not authorized to have access to SCI, or that he is prepared for public disclosure. Bolton promised not to disclose the contents of such preparation with or show it to anyone who is not authorized to have access to SCI until he had written authorization that such disclosure is permitted. Now, In December 2019, Bolton submitted a draft manuscript to the NSC for pre-publication review. Over the following 4 months, Bolton worked to incorporate the edits he received from the Senior Director for Records Access and Information Security Management at the NSC, Ellen Knight. These edits were iterative and extensive. And on April 27, 2020, Knight communicated to Bolton that she no longer considered the manuscript to contain classified material. Bolton claims that he and Knight discussed the possibility that the final written authorization might be ready as early as that afternoon. The written authorization did not issue, and Knight soon clarified that the process was ongoing. Weeks passed without further communication between Bolton and the government. On June 8, 2020, John Eisenberg, Deputy White House Counsel and legal advisor to the NSC, issued a letter to Bolton that claimed the manuscript still contained classified information. By that point, Bolton had already delivered a final manuscript to his publisher for printing and shipping without written authorization and without notice to the government. What happened was the Department of Justice under President Trump went into court to try to get an injunction to prevent any further printing and distribution of the book. The judge said, yes, Bolton disputes that his book contains any classified information and emphasizes his month-long compliance with the publication review process. He bristles at the mixed messages sent by pre-publication review personnel, questions the motives of intelligence officers. Bolton could have sued the government and sought relief in court. Instead, he opted out of the review process before its conclusion. Unilateral fast-tracking carried the benefit of publicity and sales and the cost of substantial risk exposure. This was Bolton's bet. If he's right and the book does not contain classified information, he keeps the upside mentioned above. But if he's wrong, he stands to lose his profits from the book deal, exposes himself to criminal liability, and imperils national security. Bolton was wrong. This is the judge. The government submitted classified declarations for the court's ex parte review in camera. So the court looked at the documents or the notes or whatever information was at issue. On June 19, 2020, the court held ex parte hearing for further in-camera review with the government. The parties, the judge, in the chambers reviewed the information. Upon reviewing the classified materials, as well as the declarations filed on the public document, the court is persuaded that defendant Bolton likely jeopardized national security by disclosing classified information in violation of his non-disclosure agreement obligations. Now that is damning. Bolton was the national security advisor to the president. He was entrusted with countless national secrets and privy to countless sensitive dealings. To Bolton, this is a selling point. His book is entitled The Room Where It Happened. He rushed to write an account of his behind closed door experiences, produced over 500 pages of manuscript for review. Not 4 months later, Bolton pulled the plug on the process, sent the still under review transcript to the publisher for printing. Many Americans are unable to renew their passports within 4 months, but Bolton complains that reviewing hundreds of pages of a national security advisor's tell-all deserves a swifter timetable. Access to sensitive intelligence is rarely consolidated in individuals, and it comes as no surprise to the court that the government requested several iterations of review headed by multiple officers. But what is reasonable to the court was intolerable to Bolton, and he proceeded to publication without so much as an email notifying the government. The judge's conclusion, Judge Royce Lamberth, district judge. Defendant Bolton has gambled with the national security of the United States. He has exposed his country to harm and himself to civil and potentially criminal liability. But those facts do not control the motion before the court, and so he denied the injunction.
He denied the injunction because the book was already in publication. So that's why he denied the injunction. If you look here, ladies and gentlemen, this is where, okay, this is what, okay, so many Americans are unable to renew their passports within 4 months, but Bolton complains that reviewing hundreds of pages of national security advisors tell-all deserves a swifter timetable. Access to sensitive intelligence is rarely consolidated in individuals, and it comes as no surprise to the court that the government requested several iterations of review headed by multiple officers. But what is reasonable to the court was intolerable to Bolton, and he proceeded to publication without so much as an email notifying the government. It is well settled that a mandated publication review process is not an unconstitutional prior restraint. And then it goes on to stating, hey, you know what? This is settled in court. Okay? The government submitted classified declarations for the court's ex parte review. The court has sealed ex parte hearing for. So President Trump's administration let Bolton know that there was still a review process, but he went ahead and published it anyway. The government insists that the book contains sensitive information that could compromise national security and alleges that Bolton prematurely halted his pre-publication review process in order to proceed to publication. The government insists that the book contains sensitive information that could compromise national security and alleges that Bolton prematurely halted his pre-publication review process in order to proceed to publication. And then Bolton characterizes his action. He emphasizes a substantial and extensive compliance. Literally, the whole thing was not compliance. And the conclusion by the judge was defendant Bolton has gambled. It wasn't just, the judge says, he made some points. The conclusion was he gambled with national security of the United States. He's exposed his country to harm and himself to civil and potential criminal liability. That was the judge. That was the judge's 10-page order, and you can find that in an article, Politico, The Damage is Done. And the motion to prevent publication was denied because it was already published. But let's continue.
But that's not the point. That is a damning statement by a judge in an 18-page decision where he looked at the classified information. Damning. Which is why almost none of the news media are reading to you what I just read to you. This is from the judge. United States of America versus John Bolton, June 20, 2020. This is what the judge put out. So the Department of Justice in 2020 launches an investigation of Bolton, a criminal probe, into the classified information. And what are they looking at? Well, you've heard of it before, the Espionage Act. No doubt they are. They even set up a grand jury. And they're looking under the Espionage Act, I assume 18 U.S.C. 793. Also, for those who are wondering about a statute of limitations, since this was 5 years ago, under the Espionage Act, Section 18 U.S.C. 19, it's a 10-year statute of limitations. So no statute of limitation is run, or it's not even arguably run. And so they were doing a criminal investigation. And then what happened? The Biden regime takes over. Merrick Garland takes over. And what do? Now keep something in mind. Bolton's book comes out months before the election. It's intended to harm Trump. Keep something else in mind. The so-called impeachment committee in the House, the Democrats, they wanted to interview Bolton. He refused. He saved whatever information he decided to present for his book. So it was clearly profit-oriented, right? So he refused to testify to them, not on purely constitutional grounds, because he would turn around and then present it in his book. Well, what happened to that investigation that was launched? I mean, you heard what the judge said. What happened to that investigation? Here's what happened to it. June 16, 2021, the Biden regime's in power. The Attorney General's Garland, and they issued the following stipulation of dismissal. Pursuant to Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 41A1A2, the parties stipulate the dismissal of this action with prejudice to all parties to bear their own fees and costs. That's it. No explanation. One sentence. We dismiss the case against John Bolton. They kill the investigation. It's done. Why? Why? Where are the underlying documents that were used? Did he turn them back to the government? Is that good enough under the federal law? That's the politics, isn't it? After a scathing opinion by a judge like this, after the book itself presents evidence of classified information that was withdrawn, removed from the Department of Justice? Isn't the politics, this document, the June 16, 2021 document from the Biden regime, without explanation, just dismissing the whole thing? Now, do you think that would fly with anybody else? Anybody else? Now, let's dig into this.
My name is Cecilia.
A.m. Eastern Time, Friday morning, the FBI goes to John Bolton's home and to his office. They have a warrant. Warrants are backed up by affidavits and other pieces of information, evidence that they may have. You need to have probable cause to show the court of possible crime that was committed. And the Espionage Act, as I mentioned, 18 U.S.C. 793. There could be other aspects that they're looking into as well. The Presidential Records Act, who knows? They're looking at the removal, destruction, concealment, use, misapplication of classified information. Bolton's book. The question is, what happened to that classified information? The documents, notes, other information. All accounted for? Were they put to other uses? New York Post indicates this investigation is broader than just the documents related to the book, but it's a leak investigation. They report leaks that are being investigated. They report during the Biden administration. Okay? So that's beyond the book, even though these pieces of information are in the book. The fact that any information was used, even if it's in your head, there's not physical documents or texts or emails of any kind, after your service in a way that's inappropriate is enough. So we've discussed this before in the documents case. It's a very broad statute, very broad statute. So the politics was when the Biden regime cut it off. Now, this is the same Biden regime that unleashed holy hell against Donald Trump as he left the presidency. Within months of leaving the presidency, the Mar-a-Lago raid. Oh, it's not a raid. Okay, it's a warrant. It's a search. But it's funny how they're now calling the Bolton warrant with a search a raid. But when it was Trump, don't call it a raid. It was a court-authorized warrant with affidavits. It was unbelievable. Of course, there's a huge difference. Donald Trump was president. It's been my argument from day one. The Espionage Act doesn't apply to a president or a former president. Read the history of it. Read it. It was passed in 1917. It had no intention of being applied to a president of the United States. And how could it?
A president can declassify documents. Biden, as senator, could not. Hillary Clinton certainly could not. And storing classified and top secret intel on servers is a cybersecurity nightmare, the greatest of all time, which is what Comey stated. She had classified and top secret intelligence on her servers. Nobody knows how that information was transferred onto servers. It's not even possible. It's illegal. And it's it's an impossibility from a cybersecurity perspective. But Trump did not have servers. He did not have laptops with bribery and graft. He was a former president with the power to declassify.
The Constitution trumps any statute. President of the United States can classify or declassify at will. He doesn't have to go through a process. He doesn't have to ask an underling. He is the head of the executive branch. He's in the Constitution. Classified, declassified. He can declassify on the spot. The president even said at the time, if I'm thinking I'm declassifying, I'm declassifying. People mocked it, but he's correct, because there's no way this statute can legitimately apply to him. That aside, notice how aggressively they went after him. Warrant. They went after his home. They went into his home. They took photographs. They made them public. They tried to humiliate him, and on and on and on with the documents. Oh, we had all these debates, the Espionage Act, the Presidential Records Act, and went on and on and on. And in the end, of course, the rogue prosecutor was unconstitutionally appointed, and he lost his job. Yes, it's true that
they're trying to say that the prosecutor in the Comey case was not They're trying to throw out the case. James Comey and his attorneys are trying to throw out the case. The problem is that she's not a special counsel. Jack Smith was a special counsel, not appointed in a constitutional manner. There's a chance that the Comey case could be thrown out, but very likely, which is likely what's going to take place, is that Comey's going to still have to stand trial. And if they throw out the case, he'll be indicted again for conspiracy statutes almost certainly. But there's 120 days that Pam Bondi has to appoint a prosecutor after the prosecutors found no evidence. It's the public relations spin is hilarious. But you're dealing with the bureaucracy that Comey and Bolton and Letitia James wielded against Trump is now being leveled against them. It's the bureaucracy. These are bureaucratic animals, creatures of bureaucracy. If you're a creature of bureaucracy, well, you can shine and prosper, and you can also face legal peril within bureaucracy.
They dismissed the case, but Judge Cannon really forced it because she effectively dismissed him. Now, all that said, is this retribution? Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is not retribution. Oh, I see the sad faces on TV and the crocodile tears and look at Trump, he's a dictator and so forth. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard me read from the judge's decision. The issue is whether any crime was committed. It was the Biden regime that cut off the investigation. Cut it off. Because the book that came out trashing Donald Trump was helpful to the Biden regime. It was used right up to the election. That's where the politics is. That's where it is. But imagine being the FBI director, the Attorney General of the United States, and this issue is hanging out there. The book's still out there. The regime, the Biden regime, dismissed it without explanation. Never. There's never been an explanation. Because the explanation's obvious. It was done to help Joe Biden. That's, in my view, my personal opinion, where the reward is. That's my view. But imagine not having this resolved properly. No explanation for killing the criminal investigation. And the individual at issue, John Bolton's, still out there all over TV and so forth and so on, which he's free to be.
Okay.
On Lawfare against President Trump, John Bolton is learning the hard way, perhaps, that no one is indeed above the law. The FBI spent hours today raiding Bolton's Maryland home and D.C. office. Agents were seen carrying out boxes, both locations, looking for classified documents that Trump's former national security advisor, turned, of course, liberal media fave, could still have in his possession.
Not a fan of John Bolton. I thought he was a sleazebag, actually. And he's.
Isn't it so wonderful to have a president call a political adversary a sleazebag? And so the way Democrats work is they will indict Trump and everyone around him, his attorneys, and they'll do so, but they won't call anyone a sleazebag. They won't insult anyone on Twitter or Truth. Well, actually, they will, but the officials won't. They'll do so above board, and yet every single thing they do in a bureaucratic sense is so easily so you can decipher the manipulation and the insidious, diabolical, maniacal, obsession with getting Trump through bureaucracy. They have media. When Trump says someone's a sleazeball, he doesn't have the New York Times, MSNBC, CNN, the Washington Post, Jimmy Kimmel. He doesn't have that monstrosity of a public relations, creature, monster. So Democrats say, he wrote it on Truth Social. The Comey was being called a liar by Andrew McCabe, by Attorney General Loretta Lynch 10 years ago. Or 7 years ago in the IG report. So nothing Trump wrote, and he's not going to get the selective prosecution. He got discovery. Comey got discovery, but that's fine. Everybody is entitled to discovery. Although the government made a valid case. Why would you trust this man with classified data? He leaks everything. He leaked memos right after he was fired. And then he couldn't find intent. Inspector Clouseau couldn't find intent with Clinton's servers. But the point is, Trump is honest. He doesn't like somebody. He tells the world. Democrats don't like somebody. They hire Jack Smith. They get Attorney General Letitia James. They get different attorneys generals to go after their political opponents. They try to ruin Trump. Nobody bought it. They might not even get the House. They might lose a chance at the House because they're so utterly corrupt. Anyway, let's continue. The honesty. It's not good that Trump called anyone a sleazebag. It's not a good thing. But it's refreshing in that he is the most honest politician. He will tell the world, I don't like this person. Being a politician is synonymous with lying. When somebody says, oh, you're acting like a politician. Trump, they say he lies. He's the most honest. He doesn't like you. He tells you. The Democrats, what they do, Biden says nothing. The Attorney General says nothing, Merrick Garland, but they all went after Trump with the most sinister intent. And they did so through bureaucracy, and they had all their media loyalists, calling everyone a sleazebag in media.
He suffers major Trump derangement syndrome, but so do a lot of people, and they're not being affected by anything we do. I guess his house was raided today, but my house was raided also, called Mar-a-Lago. So I know the feeling. It's not a good feeling.
Well, Bolton's been suspected of leaking secrets for years. The New York Post reports that during Trump's first term, the DOJ launched a criminal inquiry into it, but the Biden administration shut it down for political reasons. Here to weigh in is Jonathan Fahey, former federal prosecutor. Jonathan, we'll get to what President Trump also added to his comments in a moment, but what exactly do you think they were looking for here and why?
Yeah, this is quite interesting in that they're doing the search warrant now, and a lot of these issues with the classified documents and classified leaking and things like this have to do with his book in 2020. And the reason I say that's important is because to get a search warrant now, you have to have it can't be stale information. So they must have new information that he currently either has classified documents or evidence of the retention of classified documents or spreading classified information in his home. And it's important also to know this was issued by a judge in Maryland, the search warrant. So that's what I think they're looking for, is classified documents that he may still possess. And remember, he has no business ever possessing classified documents at his home, unlike Donald Trump, who actually was allowed to have them into his home. But that's what I think they're looking at, and they must have new information that led them to this search warrant just today.
President Trump was asked about whether he got a heads up on this. He said, I don't ask about this. I don't know anything about this. But, clearly that's the narrative now from Democrats, that this is Republican weaponization. He called Bolton a sleazebag. He can't stand John Bolton. Bolton hates him, dislikes him intensely. They hate each other. So now it's a question of whose ox is being gored.
Yeah, and I just think that's sort of nonsense because President Trump actually answered that quite well. It's like, yeah, there are lots of people that hate President Trump, and they're not all having their houses searched. And again, a judge in Maryland, which isn't exactly conservative or Trump-friendly in terms of judges or anything else, issued this warrant. So that judge must have looked at what was submitted and found that there's probable cause that there's evidence of a crime in his home, or they wouldn't have issued that warrant. So, again, I don't think it's really fair to jump to that conclusion right now. And again, we don't know what will amount to this, but of course that's what everyone's going to say. It's weaponization. But of course, everything against Donald Trump all fell apart with just the lightest judicial scrutiny at a higher level. So it's hard to really attack Trump. Jonathan, on this.
Everything fell apart. Nothing happened to Trump. They couldn't get him because they lied. But Bolton, you saw from the 10-page order from the judge 5 years ago, said he imperiled national security. It's right here. It's right here. Defendant Bolton has gambled with the national security of the United States. He has exposed his country to harm. He has exposed his country to harm and himself to civil and potentially criminal liability. This was stated 5 years ago. Okay? This was stated 5 years ago, before when President Trump was really at his lowest in terms of political, power, because he was on his way out, and you had Twitter's trust and safety team and all the censorship. That's censorship. Censorship is not experiencing repercussions because a person celebrates that somebody else's life was taken and they lose a job. That's not censorship. Censorship is, we can't talk about Hunter's laptop because 50 intelligence officials lied about it being a Russian disinformation campaign. They blame the Russians for everything, Democrats. It's like unbelievable. Every single thing that points to their own corruption, they blame the Russians. It's the stupidest thing you've ever heard in your life, but people still believe it.
He's really
I want to move to another subject. Sorry, Jonathan. I want to move to another subject. A federal judge in Florida late last night who's appointed.
So Greg Jarrett has some really, really interesting insights here. Check this out.
Analyst and author Greg Jarrett. Greg's a great thinker and a writer. Greg, what's your reaction to David's report here?
Well, I think Bolton's in legal jeopardy, obviously. When he was NSA, he was privy to a daily stream of classified information. It involved matters of national defense, secret intelligence. So it was so foolish to write a tell-all book, especially since he published it without waiting for final written approval from the government. Even back then, a federal judge scolded him and warned him that he was gambling with the national security of the nation, causing potential irreparable harm to the country. And the judge said to him, right to his face, you can be criminally prosecuted. So even if a sanitized version of his book was released, he's still in jeopardy in two other ways. If he kept classified documents in his home or in his office, that's a crime. And if he leaked information that he had in his head.
So the only defense of Bolton, and here's a defense of Bolton, which probably wouldn't hold up in a court of law, but if you're John Bolton, you get classified information all the time. All the time. If you accidentally take it home, a classified document could look like any other document. Let's say he took it to his home. That's a crime. And with the way, it's not retribution when the rebuttal is, well, Trump is going after his political rivals. Well, for what? Well, they indicted him. Okay, why did they indict him? Well, it was about the rule of law. Okay, great. It's about the rule of law. What's the problem now? But the only reason Trump is going after them is because they went after him. Yeah, but they went after him under the pretext of the rule of law. So the rule of law doesn't exist when they commit crimes and then Trump indicts them for crimes. If you want mercy and civility and leniency and decorum, don't try to imprison an ex-president. But if you do so, saying, Trump didn't sign this, he didn't dot an I and sign this form, prison. Well, then, that's the legal standard that you've created. Wonderful, morally superior, highly educated liberal Democrats and never Trump Republicans. You have created a legal standard. You use that legal standard to go after Trump. Trump is using the legal standard that you created to then indict anyone who committed crimes. End of story. If Bolton's name was Trump, they would have indicted him for exactly what Trump is indicting him for now.
To somebody who was unauthorized, that also is a crime. So, it looks like they convinced a judge based on probable cause that a crime might have been committed and evidence of that crime was inside either his office or a home to issue today's search warrant.
Okay, let's move on to this news coming in. The Washington Post, the editorial board, took an unusual step. It blasted New York State Attorney General Letitia James for lawfare bias, and selective prosecution after a New York appeals court tossed out what it calls her outrageously excessive and unconstitutional $465 million civil fraud fine against Trump. Now, Letitia James says she plans to appeal, but Greg, the appeals court judges sounding like they are setting the stage for the entire case to be thrown out. Listen to this. 2 of the 5 judges said they would have sent the case back for a new trial because of serious errors, and a 3rd judge said he would have tossed the case altogether.
Top to bottom, it was a ludicrous case. And the $500 million penalty, including interest, against Trump.
And I was telling you every day, ladies and gentlemen, I told you every single day that I did a million segments that it would be tossed out, and it was tossed out. Okay, I'm like batting at least 600-700 when it comes to all of this.
Trump was wholly disconnected, Liz, to the alleged wrong, such that it violated the 8th Amendment. You know, the case itself was a shameful contortion.
I'm batting about 800. I'm not batting 1,000. I'm batting about 800-900. Of the 10, you give analysis on 10 topics, I'm generally right about 7 to 8 to 9, 90% of the time, 80% of the time. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but, hit subscribe if you're new. And to my viewers, thank you so very much for being on this journey with me.
Portion of the law exploiting this consumer protection statute where no consumers were harmed, accusations of fraud where the lending banks took the witness stand and said, we weren't defrauded, we made $100 million. They did their own due diligence. They found that what Trump had done in his valuations were totally accurate. So this was classic political lawfare masquerading as a legal one. And you're right, the judges castigated Letitia James for persecuting Trump, and they utterly destroyed Judge Arthur Engoron for his absurd financial penalty. They said it was utterly devoid.
Sorry about that.
So they're giving
Who's legal analyst and author Trump, the appeals court judge.
So we weren't defrauded. We made $100 million. They did their own due diligence. They found that what Trump had done in his valuations were totally accurate. So this was classic political lawfare masquerading as a legal one. And you're right, the judges castigated Letitia James for persecuting Trump, and they utterly destroyed Judge Arthur Engoron for his absurd financial penalty. They said it was utterly devoid of any legal basis.
Let's listen to Letitia James in 2018 campaigning on getting Trump. The appeals court judges basically were citing this. Watch.
I look forward to going into the office of Attorney General every day, suing him, defending your rights, and
I look forward every day to suing him, and then Democrats have the audacity to say there's a retribution tour. I mean, you literally say, like, oh, Trump on Truth Social, Trump on Truth Social. You can't. It's like right there. She stated she looks forward every single day to suing Trump. What more do you need for selective prosecution than that?
and then going home.
I say one name, Donald Trump. That should motivate you. Will you sue him for us? Oh, we're going to definitely sue him. We're going to be a real pain in the He's going to know my name personally. President Trump cannot avoid justice in the great state of New York.
I mean, justice is supposed to be blind, right? So is...
Do you think maybe this is a little bit more overtly partisan and biased than anything Trump has ever written on Truth Social?
Letitia James representing the people of New York State or the Democrat Party?
She's representing herself and the Democrats who tried to derail President Trump's political candidacy. And what she did, you played the clip, that is highly unethical. She should be disbarred for that. When you're specifically targeting an individual, preordaining an outcome as your campaign, mantra, I mean, that is just shameful conduct by any public official, particularly an attorney general.
Thank you so much, the one and only Greg Jarrett. A pleasure to have you on.
So it'll be the third indictment.
Okay, thank you. Fox News alert President Trump firing back at John Bolton, accusing his former national security advisor of breaking the law by releasing a tell-all book about his 17 months inside the White House.
So this was going on, this was 5 years ago.
As excerpts from that book raise new questions about the president's dealings with China. Bolton claiming the House impeachment inquiry should have been broader in scope. We're learning more this morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sandra Smith.
And a very pleasant good morning to you, Sandra. I'm Ed Henry. The legal battle to block the book's publication now heating up. The Trump administration filing an emergency application for a restraining order, arguing that publishing this memoir endangers national security. This, as the president calls the book's publication, illegal.
He broke the law. Very simple. I mean, as much as it's going to be broken, this is highly classified. That's the highest stage. It's highly classified information. And he did not have approval. That's come out now very loud and very strong.
Okay, Chief White House Correspondent John Roberts is live from the North Lawn of the White House for us this morning. John, good morning.
Sandra, Ed, good morning to you. The White House is pushing back hard against John Bolton's new book, The Room Where It Happened, a memoir of his time here in the White House. As Ed mentioned at the top, the Justice Department has gone to court seeking an emergency temporary restraining order. In the Justice Department's filing, it says, quote, "To be clear, defendant's manuscript still contains classified information as confirmed by some of the government's most senior national security and intelligence officials." In the book, among other things, Bolton accuses the Democrats of, quote, "impeachment malpractice," saying that in their haste to go after President Trump on Ukraine, they missed other big targets, including what Bolton calls the president's willingness to intervene in investigations of China and Turkey to curry favor with leaders. Bolton writes in the book, quote, "to in effect give personal favors to dictators he liked." Bolton goes on to say the pattern looked like obstruction of justice as a way of life, which we couldn't accept. In an interview with ABC, Bolton saying President Trump's foreign policy was mostly driven by his desire for re-election. Listen here.
You could say that about every single president.
I don't think he's fit for office. I don't think he has the
Who cares what anyone thinks about somebody else's fitness for office? Well, this isn't like, running a mile at a certain time. It's so... The walrus.
competence to carry out the job. There really isn't any guiding principle that I was able to discern other than what's good for Donald Trump's reelection.
President Trump ripping Bolton on Twitter, saying, quote, "Wacko John Bolton's exceedingly tedious book is made up of lies and fake stories."
Don't you love it? The people don't get how genius Trump is. They don't get it. They don't get it. Like, oh my God. They're okay with Letitia James saying that she's going to sue Trump every single day, and people saying, "Oh, will you sue him for us?" They're okay with that. But oh my God, Trump said wacko. Oh my God.
Said all good about me in print until the day I fired him. A disgruntled, boring fool who only wanted to go to war, never had a clue, was ostracized and happily dumped. What a dope. In a statement, the publisher, Simon & Schuster, saying, quote, "Tonight's filing by the government," this is for the temporary restraining order, "is a frivolous, politically motivated exercise."
How on earth could Simon & Schuster or any, publisher put out a statement like this? It's a frivolous, politically motivated exercise in futility. Hundreds of thousands of copies. Oh, let's continue.
In futility, hundreds of thousands of copies of John Bolton's The Room Where It Happened have already been distributed around the country and around the world.
Yeah, Simon & Schuster. Yeah, okay. The judge literally stated defendant Bolton has gambled with the national security of the United States. He has exposed his country to harm and himself to civil and potential criminal liability. The judge literally stated that 5 years ago. And now he's being indicted. So it's like, but again, you're talking about public relations executives who were all like liberal Democrats, lifelong liberal Democrats. So obviously anything Trump does is completely absurd. Trump.
What's interesting here, Sandra and Ed, is that Bolton has managed to get both sides mad at him. Not just the president, but also congressional Democrats who say, why didn't you come to us during the impeachment hearings and tell us all of this? Why are you doing it in a book?
Because it's a balance. The never Trumpers always have a balancing act. There's always a balancing act with the never Trumpers.
No, that wasn't.
Bolton.
So here it seems like he admits to destroying potentially classified data. This is right out of the pages of Madam Secretary. The only difference is that he didn't use a hammer or bleach bit software.
So thanks for being here.
Glad to be with you.
Understand you have the book out.
Indeed.
I want to talk to you a little bit about the process first, some of the pushback, and then I want to get to the substance. Obviously, I've seen the interviews you've given. I have read the book in detail. It is very detailed. 500 pages of your time inside the room, as you say, in the room where it happened. How did you write this book? I saw in an interview that you said that the notes, you took lots of notes. The notes, as I said in my exit interview from the White House, were destroyed during the course of my tenure there. So how do you go back and fill in all of these blanks with that detail, these quotes, 500 pages?
If the notes were destroyed, how did he destroy them? Did they contain classified documents or data? If he destroyed notes in a book that allegedly has classified data, this is very important. Very important. If he destroyed the notes that he used to write a book that allegedly contains classified documents or data, was there classified information on the notes that he destroyed? And if so, he committed a felony.
Well, this is the best recollection I can put together. I'm blessed with a pretty good memory, and I thought about how to do this. I wrote a book when I left the George W. Bush administration called Surrender's Not an Option. Went through much the same process.
When were the notes destroyed?
During the course of usually the weekend following when they were taken, throughout the thing, put in burn bags, that sort of thing. But no notes were taken with me after I left the White House.
The White House says they didn't destroy it, so you destroyed them.
That's correct, sure.
If you destroyed them, it would be a violation of the Presidential Records Act.
No. During the course of the work, this was something we had burn bags in our office.
He literally does not answer the question. He does not address the issue or the topic. It would be a violation of the Presidential Records Act, but also he could potentially have destroyed classified documents. He doesn't even address what Bret Baier brings up. This is hilarious. Check it out.
With me after I left the White House.
The White House says they didn't destroy it, so you destroyed them.
That's correct, sure.
If you destroyed them, it would be a violation of the Presidential Records Act.
No. During the course of the work, this was something we had burn bags in our offices and put I don't know how many documents into the burn bags.
Once you destroy them, is that a problem legally for you because you destroy records that are supposed to be kept?
No, I don't think these are records that are supposed to be kept, and they were not, and many other people followed the same pattern.
He doesn't think, and many other people follow the same pattern, is not defense. not a legal defense for possibly destroying classified data. I mean, it's unbelievable, the arrogance. But I mean, this is like, he's not even 1/100th as arrogant as wonderful, morally superior people like James Comey, who committed so many crimes it's unbelievable, from lying under oath numerous times to he couldn't find intent in Clinton owning private servers. Inherent in owning a server, inherent in owning secret servers is the obvious intent to hide communication.
When did you decide to write the book?
Well, during the course of being in the administration, I had gone in as a lifelong conservative Republican, hoping that we would have a conservative Republican administration. And it didn't turn out that way. But I guess I should say also, I'm certainly not the first person in the Trump administration to write a book. Sean Spicer's written a book. Sarah Sanders has written a book. Others have written books.
Sure, not like this one.
This one could be seen as critical as opposed to the others, which are seen as favorable to the president.
Yes, and obviously it's at the center of another thing, which is the impeachment. I'll get to that in a minute. But you took this job as National Security Advisor under the trust of the president that those conversations were going to happen inside the White House. Fred Fleitz, your former chief of staff of the National Security Council, said this:
I don't believe national security advisors should be revealing internal candid discussions with the president. The president has to be able to know that whatever he says in those discussions won't be made public. And if he thinks they're going to be made public, a president won't consult with experts. And I think that's a very dangerous prospect for our national security.
How do you respond to that?
Well, I don't see it that way at all. In fact, I addressed this precise question in a book review I wrote in 2014 about Bob Gates's memoir of his.
He addressed the glaring, potentially irresponsible behavior in a book review. Okay, very good.
Time as Secretary of Defense in the Bush and Obama administrations, and he published his memoir during the Obama administration, was criticized for that, was criticized for its potential effect on Hillary Clinton's presidential run, his former colleague when she was Secretary of State. And I made the point then that everybody in Washington is an adult in this process. We understand exactly the way it goes. My feeling in basically all of my government jobs, from lower levels up to the last job, was that anything I said could and quite possibly would be in the papers the next morning. And this is nothing new in American history, as I point out. In Washington's administration, Hamilton and Jefferson fought with each other.
And we're getting a lecture on U.S. history from a man that a judge had already concluded defendant Bolton has gambled with. And by the way, this condemnation isn't politically motivated. It's not like Tammany Hall, New York, a judge, Trump. He almost certainly sold the country to marshes, yes, and it's terrible. This was in 2020. When President Trump's, political status was not nearly what it is right now. And still, the judge said defendant Bolton had gambled with the national security of the United States. He has exposed his country to harm and himself to civil and potential criminal liability. He's talking about the founding fathers. I wonder what, Thomas Jefferson and Washington and Benjamin Franklin, what would they think about a top official writing a tell-all book? I don't think they would be very happy, but let's continue.
Through newspapers, funded in part by putting their writers on government salaries. And somehow, poor George Washington managed to stumble through it.
Some of those pictures of you in the back of meetings, adjusting your glasses, holding notes, look like in your mind you're arranging chapters of the book. At what time in the 17 months did you say, I got to start really thinking about this? And without detailed notes, were you going to be able to do it? I mean, you left in September, and your deadline was what, the fall?
Was it really God's will?
I did something very similar, as I say, when I left the Bush administration, and that's the same pattern I followed here.
A couple of things on the pushback. Sarah Sanders this morning said this.
John Bolton was your classic case of someone who was completely drunk on power, who thought he was the president. He was constantly pushing his own agenda, which was all he cared about. The big problem for John Bolton is that's not how it works. He forgot that no one elected him to anything and that it was President Trump and President Trump's agenda that mattered within the White House.
Thoughts?
Well, she's just flatly wrong on that. I think the duty of loyalty that a senior official owes is to the Constitution and people of the United States.
You don't interpret the Constitution, the Supreme Court does, and oh, by the way, the people elected Trump, and you worked in his administration. Where are these people writing tell-all books about President Obama or Bush? It doesn't really happen. Gee, I wonder why. Or Biden. Where's the tell-all book about Biden?
We're not a feudal society. This is not the Middle Ages. We don't owe loyalty to an individual, particularly an individual who routinely undercuts his own advisors in conversations with other people.
You should disagree with advisors all the time if you have any sense of direction, or not that you should, but Kennedy, JFK, did not invade Cuba, even though he was told to by his advisors. Some of his advisors said, yeah, you should invade Cuba. That would have started World War III. So he was right in not listening to his advisors, just like Trump is right at times not listening to his advisors.
The president has talked about almost everything in this book at one level or another, and often simply not told the truth. So if the deal is the president gets to say whatever he wants, and the
John O'Brien,
American people don't get to hear the truth, is that the kind of society you want?
Well, on the flip side, you have House Speaker Nancy Pelosi saying you chose profit over patriotism. And here's what Adam Schiff said about all of this.
What John Bolton has demonstrated, and I think to the length and degree that he indicts Donald Trump, he also indicts himself for cowardice and for greed. Because there were people who did come forward, people like Colonel Vindman and Fiona Hill, who risked their careers, and he lacked that basic courage and patriotism. It was only the greed.
They set up and framed Trump with hoax after hoax. Nothing he did was impeachable. And what they tried to impeach him for, every single president has done without even the hint of impeachment.
That made him come forward in this book.
So you say it's about the Constitution and supporting the American people. Democrats would say, why didn't you step up back then?
The Democrats have a lot of reason to be concerned, I think, because, as I lay out in the book, their impeachment strategy was catastrophically wrong. I characterize what they did as impeachment malpractice. They were driven by their own political objectives to go after Trump as fast as they could, as narrow as they could, because they were concerned about messing up their own presidential nomination schedule. That's almost what they said about Donald Trump in Ukraine, misusing the power of government.
So, ladies and gentlemen, Daily Mail, John Bolton set to be indicted by a grand jury today. Okay, and grand jury expected to indict National Security Advisor. We will do a live stream later this evening when the indictment does take place. You look, let's see right here. Okay, so grand jury expected to indict. Third indictment, people. The third indictment, ladies.